I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean dire, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Dennis and I right now. We think Matt will be joining us shortly, but Dennis, how was your weekend?
Man, I had a pretty good weekend. We were busy at work, but as it turned out, I didn't have to beat that, I guess. Bought a new garage door. Can't wait to pay somebody to put that in. So, just spending money. My wife's spending my fantasy football money.
Well, I know I like our friend Matt saw the Batman, which was fun. But then, last week we had gorgeous 70-degree days, and it was like, oh, is spring upon us? Sunday morning, it was 20 degrees and snowing. Today, I'm not even sure we got to 20 degrees and it's still snowing. And just a reminder that when spring is not yet sprung here.
Well, we had a couple beautiful days. It was in the low to mid 70s. And so it was great to not have to go in, though it did rain about 4 inches starting later yesterday evening through to this morning. And for the record, I just want to say, if anybody's spending anybody's money, I'm spending my wife's money because she makes a lot more of it than I do.
Amen. Plus, happy wife, happy life.
That's right.
Well, the NFL Combine wrapped up over the weekend, so we will have some thoughts on that. And then we will also get to a few quarterbacks, and we will handicap where we think their landing spots are going to be. Just a reminder, a week from today begins the legal tampering period, with free agency officially beginning next Wednesday, the 16th. So the new league year was announced. It announced the salary cap, which is $208 million and change, just a cool $208 million and change. And they announced the franchise tag and tender amounts. A couple of guys have gotten tagged. Njoku got tagged by Cleveland. Jesse Bates got tagged by Cincinnati. And Orlando Brown got tagged by the Chiefs. But we will have a full reaction to everyone that gets a franchise tag on the Friday show, since the tag deadline is tomorrow. And I imagine there are going to be a lot of interesting choices up there, a lot of rumors, maybe Devontae Adams, maybe Chris Godwin, maybe the Bears will franchise tag Allen Robinson again just to keep him from playing football. You never know. Sorry, Bears fans. But the news that we did get today started out with a doozy. Calvin Ridley, who we last saw play in October, before he had to sit out the rest of the season dealing with some personal issues, has been suspended for at least, and I love the part, at least the entire 2022 season, as he was found to have gambled on professional football. So kind of a shocking turn of events. How does that hit you, Dennis?
Well, I'm fortunate that I only have 2 shares across 20 dynasty teams. But, I mean, the rules are the rules, and it's easy to point to the NFL's partnerships with gaming organizations and gambling organizations. But the rule is you can't bet on NFL games if you're an NFL player. I don't think there's a rule that says you can't bet. It's just you just can't bet on the NFL. It's pretty simple. He broke that rule. I don't think, a lot of people are drawing equivalencies to spousal abuse and partner abuse and sexual assaults, all of those things. I don't think you need to reduce the punishment for what Ridley did. I think you need to be a little bit more aggressive with the punishments for those other things. That's just my 2 cents. He broke a rule, and I think the most interesting part of it was that the Falcons were getting calls and offers, and they basically just shut their mouth and said, no, we're not going to move him, because they knew the investigation was going on. At least that's what's being reported. And, they're not like that fantasy manager that has not heard the news and is offering Ridley for a second to somebody before, hoping they didn't hear the news, or Ridley for a third, hoping they haven't heard the news yet. The Falcons didn't do that. So that was kind of nice, being stand-up folks. I do think with him definitely being out this year, it might be a harbinger for complete and total rebuild. They could eat some of Matt Ryan's salary, move him somewhere where he can be a contender and still eat some of his salary. They're going to save $11 million, I think, from Ridley's salary. But maybe it's time for them to kind of tear it all down, let Arthur Smith build a team that as he sees fit.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The first, it is an issue of the integrity of the game. I had this back and forth with somebody on Twitter today. I'm in agreement with you. The personal conduct things are people talk about that as being integrity. That is a kind of personal integrity, and I wish the NFL maybe would take that more seriously. It bothers me. I personally don't roster Tyreek Hill anywhere, just because I'm not a fan of what he's done off the field. I recognize he has talent, but there are a lot of those kind of integrity. That is kind of a different kind of integrity than when it comes to the integrity of the game, which we've seen, not just the NFL, but all sports have always had a zero tolerance policy for anything that potentially could lead people to believe that the games are anything but fair athletic contests. Now we complain about officiating, things like that. Those are all kind of parts of that game process that are baked in. And, by all accounts, Ridley he wasn't playing at the time that he made these bets, and he allegedly did not bet on his team to lose. He bet on them to win, which might lead to some other questions about his gambling acumen. But, you just can't have it be known that players are betting on the game. And we've seen a long history of those. When it gets discovered, you are out for at least a period of time, or like in the case of some of those famous baseball players, never got their career numbers on the field acknowledged. The other thing that I think for Dynasty, I was going to ask you I have one share of Ridley. I think this is the worst time to try to trade him. As much as it sucks, I think you've got to sit on that, because I've seen people, Ridley's maybe worth a 4th round pick in the 2022 draft. I'd rather hold Ridley for a year and hope he plays again than whatever I'm getting in the 4th round. But I don't know how you feel.
Well, I was in a 12-team super flex tight end premium. I was offered the 305 and the 310.
Yeah, I would pass.
Yeah, me too. I actually tagged somebody. I get it. You're going to try. You want to strike. Like, I bought low on Saquon Barkley when he was injured. I bought low on Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott when they were injured, George Kittle. So I get the process behind it. And I think if it was maybe a mid-second, I might sell him for a mid-second. Even especially if maybe it was a 23 mid-second. That might entice me. Maybe the 3-5 and a player that I don't like, kind of thing. And so there's a deal to be made, but I just feel like if you're going to offer me the 305 and 310, which are basically lottery tickets anyways, I just assume play the lottery with a known talent.
Yeah, and it will be interesting. I almost wonder if Atlanta goes a little bit of the route of Detroit because of the cost and everything with Ryan. I think it's after this year that it becomes easier to get out of it. Do you use these picks to maybe get a young wide receiver that then can learn with a veteran coach to improve the lines, the defense, some of the other things? If the Falcons got a couple of pieces, given the way the NFC South is sitting right now with huge unknowns in Tampa Bay, Carolina, and New Orleans, Atlanta might actually have one of the better shots to win. So they're kind of in a weird situation too. You already have Kyle Pitts. We saw Russell Gage kind of stepping up. There's a lot of possibilities. I'll be curious to see what they do. One player that we also know will not be back is tight end Jack Doyle. Indianapolis Colt, played for 9 years, has decided to retire. How does this strike you, Dennis?
He did not look. He was very Jason Witten last season. Did not move well. Was just kind of. He played hard, but man, you could tell that the years of injuries have kind of sapped his mobility and his strength. I think it's time. Indianapolis has some opportunities. They need a second receiver across from. Basically, right now, it's a good offensive line, Pittman and Jonathan Taylor, and they need to add some talent at the skill positions.
Yeah, and a lot of questions in Indianapolis, including among their quarterback, who's one of the guys we will talk about in a little bit. Well, transitioning from those pieces of the NFL to the guys that are coming into the NFL, we talked a little bit about the combine, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends on Friday. The running backs were going as we were on the air, so we are going to talk about them. And then we saw a couple of notable defensive performances. But Dennis, what stood out to you for the balance of the combine?
Well, I think from the running back position, the top three guys, even with Spiller not really doing anything, they kind of cemented themselves as the top three guys. It's Hall, it's Walker, it's Spiller. I think Spiller is going to be fine at his pro day. He'll produce well. Walker, a little shorter than I expected at 5'9", but at 5'9", 211, that's a pretty solid running back. He looked decent in the passing drills. He did not look like he was not fighting the ball when it was thrown to him. So I think that you can kind of check that box. It'll come down to how well can he protect in the passing game. Breece Hall clearly looks like the number one guy in this class. And with the relative strength of the quarterback class, I think you're going to see a lot of Breece Hall going at the 101 and Superflex as well. The quarterbacks, I think they did, Malik Willis looked good. It's still a situation. You've got one guy with a high ceiling, that's Malik Willis. And then you've got some other guys that, that their ceiling is probably QB 10. Guys like Ritter, he looked pretty good. Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, they all did what they were supposed to at the combine. It was nice to see. Lots of speed at the wide receiver position. That was interesting to see. Treylon Burks, it's hard not to get wrapped up in the excitement of guys running 4.3s, and then you've got Burks come out and run a 4.55. I think it was amended to a 4.5. But I like what Burks does. It would have been nice to see a little more from him in the explosion drills, the broad jump, the vertical. But there's not a lot of big receivers. There's a lot of small that I think are going to be able to produce, but there's only a couple guys in Burks and London that kind of have that alpha profile. Pickens, I think, had flashed a little bit, but he hasn't been consistent.
Well, you may have locked up there.
I did. God darn it.
Well, yeah, I think for me, one of the takeaways
that are going to be productive. but I don't know that there's a Jonathan Taylor or a Kyle Pitts, an AJ Brown in this rookie class.
Yeah, I think I was going to say that I think one of the takeaways for me, I was very impressed, Saturday and Sunday when we got the defenders out there. This might be a better defenders draft than, some of the offensive skill players, which is good for NFL terms, maybe not great for fantasy. I think that's why you've seen a lot of varying opinions on the class of 2022 kind of bailing out. But I would agree with you. Breece Hall probably helped himself to solidify the number one. I was glad to hear you say you weren't jumping out on Spiller. I saw a few people with a little bit of overreaction with him not wanting to run and not having some incredible drills there, saying, well, I guess he's no longer a top 3 consideration. I think that's probably a little bit of an overreaction. But one of the guys that probably was on the cusp of maybe being in the top tier that seemed to take a massive hit at the combine is Kyron Williams, who came in a little bit smaller than people had hoped for and ran a 4.78 40, which is the same 40 that defensive tackle Jordan Davis ran. So, Dennis, thoughts on Kyron Williams?
I think it was his official time was a 4.65. If you look at the tape, he has a lot of skill. He doesn't have breakaway speed, which at 195 pounds, I guess you would like to see that. But that doesn't mean he's going to be a bad pro. I think that it'll end up being a situation where he gets pushed down in the draft a little bit, but he could go and run a 4.5 at his pro day and still have the scouts go, okay, this guy will be fine. I think the hard thing with him is that you have a lot of guys that will do that. They'll try to manipulate their the combine and the pro. So they'll try to bulk up and get heavier for the combine and then say, no, I'm not going to run because they've added 6 or 7 pounds that they don't normally carry. And then they drop that weight and then run it on their home track where they feel comfortable and they feel like they can run a fast time. Williams catches the ball extremely well. He's got very good lateral movement. He can run between the tackles, but at 5'9", 195 pounds, you probably don't want him carrying the ball, a dozen times a game up the middle. I think he'll settle into a complementary role, which I feel like is what he was always destined for anyways. There's only about 3 guys at the top of the order, the top of the draft that I think look like they can come in and take over. And then you've got some other guys like, Zamir White, Rashad White, that are bigger backs. Think what is it? Who's the guy out of Florida? What was his name?
Dameon Pierce, I think.
Yeah, Dameon Pierce. Yeah, there he is. That have the size to carry the ball. Even Brian Robinson, though he's not terribly athletic. But there are some guys that I think may stumble into a role, a la Chris Carson in Seattle when he was, I think a 6th round draft pick, and kind of stumbled into a role and was able to hold on to it. It'll be nice to watch and see how it plays out. Landing spot is going to be really, really key with a lot of these guys, and Kyron Williams is no different. I think if he were to go somewhere that ran like the where he could fulfill the Alvin Kamara type pass catching role, even though he's not as dynamic as Kamara, that's kind of the offense I would see him fitting best in.
Yeah, and I think the combine probably hurt some of his hype a little bit, but I'm with you. We're at the kind of time and stage where seeing landing spot, draft capital, if there's a team that went through interviews and falls in love with him after his pro day and takes him in the 3rd round, you're still You're still probably looking at somebody that you're interested in taking. I think one of my takeaways too from the rest of the running back group is we had mentioned on Friday, or I was curious to see if any of those guys kind of established themselves or really took off. And I didn't think we saw a big group of people kind of jumping up in there. And it is perfect timing. You mentioned Kyron Williams, and Matt Bruning appears.
Oh no, that's a bad thing. What are you talking about?
We were just talking about the RB combine, and we were talking about Williams did not have a great performance. How are you feeling about him after the combine?
It's hard to say because I consistently tell people do not overrate or don't double count. Right? That's what everybody says. Don't double count the combine. But it's really hard to not double count what Kyron Williams did on Saturday. I mean, he did look good in the drills, which is kind of what his game is. If you watch him on tape, I think he's one of the best pass blockers in this class. He's got really good feet, but obviously not coming in over or at least really close to 200 pounds and then running like what an offensive lineman runs, it's not great. I think it's likely going to affect his draft capital, even if he goes out there and has a really good pro day, at which case that's probably why I'm fading him now. I mean, he was pretty locked into RB4 for me, but if he goes in like the 4th or 5th round, I mean, I think you have to drop him in your rookie draft. So there's no way you can take him there if a guy like, Rashad White, Zamir White, kind of jump him draft capital wise, and with what they've shown in the combine and what they've put on tape as well, I think unfortunately we probably have to fade Kyron some. The hope was he was going to be Austin Eckler, and while Austin Eckler was a little bit smaller, he was a hell of a lot faster. So was Phillip Lindsay, right? Like you talk about those smaller backs, the one thing they have is speed, and Kyron showed us he does not have that.
Yeah, the hope was Austin Eckler, and he turned out to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah.
Bummer. So, we talked about him a little bit. Is there anyone, and I'll kick it to you first, Dennis, any one running back aside from the big three that stood out to you at the combine that maybe caught your eye?
I liked Rashad White. 6 foot, 214 pounds. Well, he only had 2 years of FBS production. He rushed for 1,000 yards last year. Caught 43 pass protection, but he's good at catching the ball. And at 214 pounds, I feel like it's just about technique and reps for him. And then Zamir White looked real well. But I'm a big fan of James White. I tweeted out over the weekend with the combine. I said, James White is who you – or not – yeah, James White – or James Cook, excuse me. James Cook is who you wanted Kyron Williams to be. Cook looked good. He 4.41. He's always been a great pass catcher. 195 pounds, I think, 199, somewhere in there is what he weighed in at. 5'10". So I think he's going to be a guy that brings a dynamic pass catching. Pairing him and Zamir White in the NFL is kind of almost perfect. You got the big bruiser and then the pass catching back, which would be funny if a team did that. I would laugh my ass off. But those are a couple of guys I think that jumped out to me.
Is there anyone that jumped out to you, Matt?
I mean, Garrett's guy, Zamir White, right? I mean, he's kind of been pumping him up, talking about how good he has looked on film. I thought he had a really good combine. Zonovan Knight looked pretty good as well, outside of the top 3 guys. I mean, the big ones, Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall, in my opinion. I mean, both guys Breece Hall weighed in, pretty much came in exactly what we were expecting, and then ran faster than any of us were expecting. And then Kenneth Walker, there was a lot of fear that he wasn't going to be 200, comes in over 200 by a good amount, and then runs faster than Breece Hall. I think that helped both of them possibly jump Isaiah Spiller, who was RB1 for a lot of people. And then, as Dennis mentioned, Rashad White. I think Rashad White's probably the biggest winner out of all of the running backs, because, I mean, Breece Hall was, for the most part, everybody had him as like 1 or 2. So him jumping Isaiah Spiller, if you had him at 2, is probably not a massive win because he was already up there, where Rashad White was a guy, some were talking about as maybe like the 6th or 7th running back in this class. He after this weekend may have just vaulted himself up to RB4 with Kyron's poor performance as well.
A committed team helping you get to what matters.
I don't know who.
I just know that we're a committed team. That was all Dennis was trying to convey to everybody, I think.
It's like, oh my God, who is it? Okay. Well, we talked about some guys that maybe didn't have a great combine, but I wanted to, before we don't talk tons about defense, but Jordan Davis, pretty fantastic 4.78 for a big man up there. He was probably going to be the top defensive tackle anyway. Do we think he may have boosted himself into top 10 consideration? You're muted.
It comes a lot of it comes down to the team needs. There are some concerns about being in a heavy rotation, not playing a ton of snaps, not being in the greatest shape. He ran really, really well. How many times is he going to have to run like that in the NFL? At defensive tackle, it's all about short area quickness and explosion. So as long as he has that, I think that's going to be good for him. I think right now a lot of people are looking at him and feeling like he's going to be a giant Aaron Donald, and I don't see that from his game. I think he's going to be a really good defensive tackle that's strong enough to push the pocket, can make some plays, and maybe get more sacks than most defensive tackles. But I also think he's going to end up he's going to have to work himself into NFL shape, or he's going to end up with pretty limited snaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the buzz is that he's going to be top 15 for sure, right? Him and his teammate Devontae Wyatt. So I would be very surprised if he falls out of that. I'm obviously with Dennis as well. Some of that I think was just how much depth they had on that not just that defensive line, just that defense in general at Georgia. Maybe he didn't have to run that many reps, but that's definitely a question I'm sure is going to be asked of him is, limited reps, how much does that matter in the NFL? Maybe he starts off slow but comes on strong. But I mean, that big man right there running his 40 at 4.78 is just it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm very excited to see where he goes, and I imagine he's not falling out of. I would bet they both go top 10, but no worse than top 15.
I mean, and it's crazy that he's lost like 35 pounds since the season ended too.
All I know is a lot of mocks had him going to the Chargers, and after that combine, I'm really hoping he goes higher than that, just as, somebody who has a rooting interest with the Broncos. So the other big piece of news from the combine is this is the last year of the contract with Indianapolis. So it's possible it goes back to Indianapolis. It's possible it goes to Los Angeles. It's possible it goes to Las Vegas. Possible it goes right into Matt's backyard in Dallas. Do you guys have any preference? Matt, would you be excited if it was in Dallas?
I mean, I'd be excited because I could go to it and not have to spend a whole lot of money to go all the way to Indy. But from everybody I know that has been there, and we saw a lot of it on Twitter. I saw at least a lot of it on Twitter, at least on my timeline the past couple of days, that it needs to stay in Indy. Just seems like they are really well set up for that. I do think it'd be kind of cool if they maybe moved it around here and there. They said if it ever did come to Dallas, it would be fun to be able to go because I'd imagine it'd either be at the Star, which is their training facility in Frisco, which is like an hour and a half drive for me, or somewhere by the stadium, which is about a 30-minute drive. Would be awesome to be able to go see all that stuff in person. I have to spend all the money to fly to Indianapolis, get a hotel, but Indy seems like it's done a great job with it since it's had it. I don't know that it necessarily needs to move.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's an institution, and the old timers are going to be like, "Don't move it. It needs to stay in Indianapolis. It's classic. That's where it goes." But I mean, how's it worked out moving the draft? That seems to work out pretty well, and I think, all things considered, if they can execute all of the same drills somewhere else and make more money by moving it around, they're going to move it. It's all about the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to bring up the draft part about it. That is the one thing that I'd like to see because I do think that that's really brought in added extra fun element to drafts is having those home crowds there. Like, I really would be intrigued to see if that continued and that if that worked with the combine as well. Like, I know when I was watching at times, they said they had about 10,000 people in there, 10,000 fans in there. Like, would they be able to fill up more places? And not that fans don't want to go to Indy to watch the combine, but if they did move it around, like, would that be one of those things like the draft where it's an experience? You're like, you know what? Like, I want to go see it in person, so I'm going to buy a ticket. And I do think it'd probably be more fun for the players who are there running their 40s. Like, maybe it's because I can't remember what happened to me last week, but I don't remember last year was COVID, so that's probably why I don't remember that.
I don't even think they had a
years,
combine.
they didn't. That's what I was about to say. That makes sense why I'm not remembering anything from last year. A couple of years ago, I don't really remember there being that many fans cheering and applauding players as they ran 40s and everything. Like, that was kind of a cool thing to watch on there. Like, those wide receivers run that all excited. You hear all the fans cheering for them. Like, would be kind of cool to see that move around, especially if they're rooting for, like, you know, if it does come here to Texas and there's, you know, say that's next year and Bijan Robinson's out there running his 40 and you have all these Texas fans in there cheering him on as he's doing it. It would be probably a very cool experience.
I'm personally pulling for Las Vegas, and then I think we should do live shows all week from the combine.
I would concur.
All right, Dennis. Well, that is a good segue. Tell the people how they can win some money.
Well, if Calvin Ridley had listened to me, he'd be playing hoops right now. And hoops in October of last year, November. Hoops fans, the latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is too good to pass up. I'm talking between the legs 360 windmill good. New customers can bet just $1 on any team and get $150 in free bets if they win. It's that simple. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you can still take your shot at a big payday. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Basketball Contest. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Bet just $1 on any NBA team and get $150 in free bets if they win. That's promo code TPPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 and older. Minimum age and location requirements vary by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full list of requirements and state-specific responsible gaming resources. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call or text the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In New York, call 1-877-846-7369. That's 1-877-8-HOPE-NEW YORK or text HOPE New York 46737.
So close.
Did I freeze?
Yeah, that's all right. We got the Hope New York, or as we like to call it here, Hope Any. Well, as mentioned at the top of the show, legal tampering period begins a week from today. Free agency a week from Wednesday. A lot of talk going on.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe Ross claims he was in during the legal tampering period.
All right. So what we're going to do today is we are going to look at a few notable quarterbacks who could be on the move. I'm going to give a name, and we are all going to make our best guess of where they play in 2022. It is just that simple. And we're going to start with the man, the myth, the 24-hour news cycle, Aaron Rodgers, who has promised that he will end all of our suffering on Tuesday afternoon. One person speculated he might have just jumped out and done it tonight because he was starting to lose the attention thanks to Calvin Ridley's suspension. But he has promised to give some kind of indication of where he might play tomorrow. Dennis, where is that going to be?
It's going to be in Green Bay. I mean, the team, they're going to franchise Devontae Adams. They're going to restructure his deal with an extension. He'll get some more money. They've got a great opportunity to win. Bakhtari, who's one of his best friends, is there. He's not going anywhere. They have a good defense. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. I don't see the allure outside of somebody saying, we're going to give you so much money and we're going to give Green Bay so much capital that it makes sense, at which point it won't make sense for whoever acquires him. Yeah. So I think he's staying in Green Bay.
Matt?
I mean, the logical answer is Green Bay. But the one thing I will say is I think all three teams that he's listed might be better set up for future success than Green Bay in Denver, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee. And I know that's crazy to say, but I mean, Green Bay's losing a lot of free agents. I don't know that defense is going to be quite as good as they were last year. I mean, Denver, you've got all those weapons. You've got a great defense if he does go there. Pittsburgh, same thing. I mean, I know they've got a bad offensive line, but in my opinion, he's also, for all the drama he causes, he is one of the smarter quarterbacks in the league. I don't think the offensive line is going to be that big of an issue for him. And then Tennessee, I mean, we saw what Tennessee was able to do with Ryan Tannehill, of all people. If he goes there, like, I do think he stays in Green Bay, but part of me would love to see him just kind of move on and see what happens. He's a guy that I'd love to see ride out his career with one team, because we rarely see that. And I feel like he is a Green Bay Packer, but hell, if Tom Brady's going to go play for another team, why the hell not Aaron Rodgers? Let's mix it up, baby. Denver doesn't need to go get a quarterback now in the draft. They trade that first-round pick. They get Aaron Rodgers. They're an instant Super Bowl contender. Same with Pittsburgh. Same with Tennessee. Like, whoever gets Aaron Rodgers, I think they're going to be the favorites to win the Super Bowl. I want Denver. I want Denver because that's two matchups a year against Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. Oh man, that's like, those are going to be primetime games every single week, and I'm here for it.
You know, I thought we were friends, but then twice a week, I just learned that we're not. We're just acquaintances. No, I think he stays in Green Bay. I'm kind of over Aaron Rodgers a little bit because of some of his behavior and spectacle. And I have to be honest, that whole going on Pat McAfee every week, that would not play here. That would play very poorly here. It doesn't take long for people here to turn on you. I think people forget after the success he had, but Peyton Manning actually drew boos in like his second or third game because Denver started out 1-4 and he was throwing interceptions. I don't know. Be careful what you wish for.
Well, if Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh, he may not throw a lot of interceptions, but he'll probably set a new career high for passes thrown away to avoid interceptions.
Yeah. So number 2 on the list, another guy who seems to be consummately rumored for trades the last 2 seasons. That's Russell Wilson. He's still under contract in Seattle. Pete Carroll seems optimistic that they've patched things up and that they have no intention of moving him. Do you agree, Matt?
I kind of feel like I do, but I'd love to see him go to Pittsburgh. Better weapons, slightly better offensive line. Not much, but we've seen how good he can play with the shitty offensive line. And Pittsburgh's a slight upgrade. And then you get a guy like Najee Harris. I mean, playing for Tomlin, who, again, I will continue to say is one of the best coaches in the NFL. And I think they could probably make it happen, right? Like, they've got a decent first-round pick. I think they're built to win now. Like, if they trade their first, second, and maybe like a first down the line, I think Seattle does that. They can rebuild on the fly, getting that great draft capital right there. Probably get their quarterback in this draft to build around if they don't want to build around Geno Smith, or if they want to trade and take Dwayne Haskins or Mason Rudolph off the Steelers' hands. I'm sure they'll send them. And I think that'd be a great place for Russell Wilson to go, but I do think at the end of the day, he probably stays with Seattle, because I know he gave an interview recently as well saying that, like, Seattle's home, that's where he's raised his kids, his family's all there. He just, for the first time in what feels like a year, he seemed more resigned to being happy in Seattle than we've kind of heard the rumors be leading up into this. So I do think he actually stays.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of media circus around him. There's a lot around Rodgers too, though. There's a lot of circus with Rodgers. I think Russ stays. I don't know that there was really anything to patch up between him and Pete. I think it came down more to, was Pete going to retire? And I think if Pete retired, then Russ wants out. He's like, if you're gone, I don't want to be part of a rebuild here. I want to go somewhere where I can compete. I'm 34 years old. I think I've earned that. Well, Pete's not going to retire. Yes, they have probably the same issues they've always had, as in they don't invest in their offensive line. But you got DK Metcalf, you got Tyler Lockett. I don't know that, when I look at it, I don't know that I'd like to see Russ anywhere else at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I think he ends up probably staying in Seattle as well. Our third guy, one of the more polarizing, Desean Watson. Do you think he moves somewhere? Do you think he plays, Dennis?
I think Desean Watson should go to the island of misfit toys, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he'd be the best quarterback they've had there in 7 years, 5 years.
Probably ever.
Ben's been down for quite a while. He's got the legal stuff he's got to take care of, and he'll probably end up serving a suspension last year. At what point are they going to go time served? It's like it's hard to say, but he's got a good mobility. The hard part is that with teams like Pittsburgh is, what do they have to give up? If you're giving up first and second round picks, you need those because you need to draft offensive linemen to keep this new quarterback upright. They need to build there as well as get somebody like Desean Watson. But I think Watson. I don't know how. I can't fathom a scenario he stays in Houston. I also can't fathom a scenario where Houston gets 5 to 6 pieces in return, meaning picks and players total for him. To me, Easterby's smoking crack if he thinks that's what he's going to get.
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh could be a good spot. I mentioned that with Russell Wilson, Mike Tomlin, got Brian Flores there as well. I think Mike Tomlin's the kind of head coach that could weather that. The storm, because I'm sure there's going to be some blowback wherever Desean Watson goes, just based on what happened off the field. And I think the Steelers organization could as well. I think they are one of the better, more well-run organizations as well. They have a lot of respect and clout. So I think they could bounce back from that if they brought him in. I just don't know who trades for him. I don't know that he gets suspended for the whole season. Roger Goodell doesn't ever seem to go with the time served policy, so I think they're probably going to hit him with like an 8 to 10 game suspension that'll probably get worked down through arbitration to like 4 or 5 games. I don't think Miami's in play anymore, so I really don't know. Like, I actually don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he stays in Houston. I mean, no one else is going to trade for him, and I don't think they cut him if whatever, because it does seem like they're moving towards some kind of legal end to whatever happened off the field. We don't know the full story. I'm not going to dive into it. I'm going to be honest, I haven't even looked into it because I don't care. I don't want to know the things that he did or didn't do. I'm happy living in the cave over here about that stuff. But if he does end up getting cleared to play after he settles with everything that happened and he gets hit with that suspension, don't think the Texans cut him, and if they can't trade for him, I don't see why he would. You're not going to continue to pay him whatever it is, $8 million a game or whatever they're on the hook for, and just leave him on the bench. I don't think anybody wants to continue to do that. So I think at worst he might or likely is back with the Texans this year.
Yeah, I think he's back with the Texans too. I would say going back to he can't really get tagged for time served because the NFL made it very clear last year that they had no intention of suspending him. It was the Texans' decision to deactivate him. He was paid his full salary. It was their choice not to play him, not the league's. And I know from a fan perspective, we think of that, especially as fantasy managers, for like, dude sat out a year. Well, his team elected to sit him out a year. I tend to be with you. I think he ends up staying in Texas with the Texans. Yeah.
Really quick on Pittsburgh, though, too, because we mentioned trading the picks away. They are top 12 in cap space. So if they trade those picks away, there's a couple offensive linemen available in free agency. If they get Russ or Desean, if they make that trade, I'm sure they could figure out a way to rework those deals a little bit and possibly bring in an offensive lineman or two. And then you kind of, like I said, you're repairing on the fly a little bit, because I do think with that defense and some of the weapons they have on offense, they are ready to go now to try and win another Super Bowl.
Well, our next guy is somebody that we can pretty much be guaranteed will be with a new team next year, and that is Jimmy Garoppolo, probably one of the more attractive potential trade targets for QB-needy teams, which is seems like 75% of the league. So, Matt, where do you think he ends up?
I mean, the perfect fit is the Carolina Panthers, right? Like, that's just what they do. They bring in these bad quarterbacks who are not at all going to work out. I really don't know. I mean, clearly, I think San Francisco is going to trade him. It seems like they've pretty much all but made that well known. But who really needs one? I mean, maybe Pittsburgh if they can't get a Russ Wilson or Desean Watson, because like I don't know that they trade up to grab a quarterback. I don't know what quarterback falls. Like maybe Hal, he I think would be the perfect fit for Pittsburgh, but does he fall all the way down to I think they have pick 20? If not, maybe Indy. Indy seems like a safe bet with them probably moving on from Carson Wentz. I don't know that Jimmy G's much of a step up from Carson Wentz. He's probably a little bit of a step up. So if I had to bet, I can't say Washington because I hope somebody else goes to Washington. So I'm going to go Indy or Pittsburgh, I guess, would be my top guesses.
I mean, I feel like Jimmy's a real good fit for Indianapolis. A good offensive line, a good running game. He's not, part of the issue with Wentz is he'll play hero ball and turn the ball over. Or he'll try to run and turn the ball over. Jimmy just doesn't do that kind of stuff. He may make an errant throw now and again, but he doesn't start to force the ball in where it shouldn't go. I could see him fitting there. Washington, probably another good fit. They could use some help on the offensive line. He's going to go somewhere. I mean, I can't imagine they keep him in San Francisco. I mean, they could. He had the surgery, so that's going to depress his trade market some. There's mixed stories about just how well Trey Lance is doing. I don't know how much weight you give to some of the sources there, but I feel like that Lance should be the starter there, but I wouldn't mind seeing Garoppolo in Indianapolis. That's where I'd like to see him go.
I don't know why, but I think he ends up in Tampa Bay.
That was going to be my next one. I was just thinking about that.
He backed up Tom Brady for all those years. I just don't see Bruce Arians riding with Kyle Trask. They don't seem to be in a great position to grab a rookie. I'm not sure Arians wants to try to go through developing somebody out of this class. So just a feeling. Well, we mentioned we might see Jimmy in Indianapolis. What do you guys feel about Carson Wentz? Dennis, do you think take it that you think he goes on the move somewhere?
Honestly, I don't think he does. I think I feel like they have to keep him and go. Maybe they bring in competition that's not Jacob Eason or Sam Ehlinger. But I do think that, in the right circumstances, Wentz has performed. I don't know if it's just simply a confidence thing, like what enough hits, you make enough mistakes, and you just kind of, at some point, you're like, oh, I just don't know. Now I'm afraid to pull the trigger, or I'm going to throw the ball away, and I underhand lob it to a defensive back at the 3-yard line, and he returns it for a touchdown. He played well enough that he should be better. I just can't understand why he just is sliding backwards and backwards and backwards. At some point, I mean, but then again, if you look at it, Nick Foles has kind of done the same thing for his whole career. He'll have a few good games, a nice stretch of games, and then when he gets a shot, he shits the bed. So maybe that's just kind of where he is, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see him as anything more than a backup, at least this year. I know it's not the strongest quarterback class, but, realistically, he's had one good season in the NFL. Like, it's crazy because myself included, I really harp on that season. He should have won an MVP had he not blown his knee out at the goal line diving in for a touchdown. And then we all kind of I think fantasize and make that season maybe all Carson Wentz. And outside of that season, he hasn't done much. I don't know that a team bets on him at this point. I think he's likely going somewhere. Maybe he goes somewhere and is given an opportunity to compete for a starting job, but I don't know anybody brings him in to be a starter. I do think Indy just cuts him. I mean, they made the trade. GM's name is not coming to me at the moment for some reason. I can't think of what his name is. It's not Ryan Grigson. That was the guy beforehand. He was a horrible GM. Who's the Colts GM now? I can't remember. Ballard. Ballard is not the kind of GM that's going to be afraid to just cut his losses. I think he realizes that trade's just not going to work out. I think he just lets Wentz go, and I think he probably ends up on a team to either back up or compete for a starting job. But I don't think he's starting next year.
Well, I mean, I feel like he's got to get somebody better, and there's not a lot of people on this list that are going to be moving that are better. And I don't think anybody in this rookie class, unless somebody outperforms expectations, is going to be able to come in and be a starter over Wentz.
Yeah, that's, for me, the sunk cost is that they lose their first-round pick, and that's part of my argument. I think he may end up actually staying on the Colts roster, and they either bring in competition or draft somebody where they can in the second round to try to make a move. But you're not going to get a first back for Carson Wentz after that season. So he might just be a guy that ends up stuck there. Probably one of the more interesting names on this list, Teddy Bridgewater. He had a career year in Denver, which amounted to 7-7, and people being glad that he's probably not coming back to Denver, which probably tells you where he's at. But where do you think he goes in free agency?
Backup. I don't care. I don't think he's not staying in Denver.
Like he's the kind of guy I think that goes to San Francisco and backs up Trey Lance. I think he's going somewhere where he's going to be a backup somewhere with somebody that's going to be told that they're getting the job. You know, maybe he goes to Chicago and backs up Fields. Maybe he goes to back to Minnesota, backs up Kirk. But I feel like he's in that Colt McCoy arena now where you like to have him on your team because he's a solid backup. He's a team guy. And if you have to put him in for a couple games, he's probably not going to cost you. But if you have to start him for 12 games, that you should be evaluating the draft pretty hard.
Yeah, I thought about this. I think he goes back to New Orleans. Had some success there. They liked him there, and I think New Orleans is a team that's probably going to take a little bit of a step back.
I mean, for what it's worth, he's had some success pretty much everywhere. It just has never been sustained.
I'm going to lump these next two guys together. These are two veterans on high-priced contracts. There's been some talk about whether they get moved. Do you guys think one, both, or neither of them moves? And that's Kirk Cousins in Minnesota and Matt Ryan in Atlanta. I'll throw it to you first, Matt.
Cousins for sure, no. I mean, he's got, what is it? If he gets cut this year, the dead cap is $45 million or traded. I don't think anybody's paying that, even if they want to get out from him. Next year, he's an undrafted he's a free agent, unrestricted free agent. Just let him go. You got 1 year with him. Let him go. Matt Ryan, I don't have his. I was trying to pull it up, but I kind of think the same thing. I don't think that he's going anywhere either. I mean, he wasn't that bad last year. In my opinion, he wasn't at least the reason that they lost some of the games that they did. It was their defense. So his dead cap is 40 million, and then next year is 15. I feel like 15 is probably a little bit easier to digest. If he's bad, I think you stick with him. Maybe you grab a quarterback this year since you passed on Justin Fields last year, and let him sit for a year behind Matt Ryan. But I don't think either one of those guys are going anywhere.
Yeah, I think Kirk is staying. I can't see any reason to move him. The only reason I think Ryan would get moved is if they go into a complete rebuild and they're trying to get something like capital, so they can start to build towards their rebuild. But Ryan's his contract's like 40 mil or something. They're probably going to have to eat at least half of that if they trade him.
Yeah, I don't think either of those veterans are going anywhere. And if I'm a Minnesota fan, I'm also feeling a little blue because they're talking about doing a contract extension with Kirk Cousins because the suffering will never end. Beatings will continue until morale improves. We're going to go rapid fire with these last couple of guys that are probably looking to try to get a second chance. The first of those, Marcus Mariota, wasn't terrible when he was in Tennessee. Spent the last couple of years as a backup with the Raiders. Dennis, do you think he lands somewhere and gets a shot?
I think he should, but I feel like there's sort of an aura around him now that he's settled in nicely behind Carr. I don't get the I'm rehabbing my stock feel from him, which is after his departure from Tennessee, that's what it should be. I'd love to see him maybe in Washington. I think that would be a good fit for him. Tampa, maybe. I think he deserves a shot. Whether he gets one, the NFL has just been so funny lately. Some people are getting it, some people aren't. New Orleans would be a good opportunity. Hell, even if the I think that would be a nice spot for him.
I don't know that he gets a chance to be a starter. If he does, I think Washington or New Orleans are probably the best spot for him to go. I think a good place for him would probably be Philly. They run an offense, I think that's conducive to his skill set. Back up Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts gets hurt, or if they finally decide Jalen Hurts isn't the answer, and maybe they want to give Marcus Mariota a shot, that'd be a place to go. I think Philly or honestly staying in Las Vegas and backing up Derek Carr probably his best options.
Yeah, I think he might end up going somewhere where they take a rookie and he has a chance to be a bridge quarterback. And I don't know why, but Pittsburgh and Denver are two places that I think he could end up. Our next one, Jameis Winston, looked like he was going to have his chance to be the guy for New Orleans. Knee injury kind of knocked that out. Do we think he goes anywhere, gets a shot?
I think they tried to keep him in New Orleans.
Yeah, it just seems like the best fit right now. I don't know that if they don't get like a Jimmy G or something, I think it just seems I know you love Taysom Hill. I don't think that he's going to be the future quarterback there. So I think they got to get somebody, and they can probably bring Winston in on a fairly cheap contract for at least a year.
I don't know why, but part of me really wants him to go back to Tampa Bay. Just to see
that's not going to happen. Bruce Arians was very open and honest about that.
Last guy on our list, the guy who, maybe saw his stock improve the most by not playing in 2021, and that's Mitch Trubisky. Kind of seemed like was ridden out on a rail in Chicago, signed a backup deal in Buffalo, never really played. We saw how unsuccessful Fields and Dalton were with Nagy last year in 2021. So Mitch Trubisky back out on the market. Matt, do you think he gets a shot?
There's two places, one of which I'm not loving all the rumors, and that's to back up this guy or compete with that guy in Cleveland. I don't know that would be a great move for the Browns, mostly because both those guys, in my opinion, have literally nothing in common. That I don't think either one of their games translates very well. If he does go there, I'd be interested to see, obviously, if he's able to beat out Baker. I don't think he's quite as good. A place that I think could be an interesting place for him to go is a team we just mentioned, the New Orleans Saints. I mean, I don't know the name of him off the top of my head, but the offensive coordinator trained under Sean Payton. Those guys have worked together for years. They both had an infatuation with Taysom Hill. Well, who's maybe not quite the athletic version, but probably a faster, better passing version of Taysom Hill? That's Mitch Trubisky. And you might not have to pay that much money to get him because I don't know how many other teams are going to be reaching out. I think he does deserve to get another shot. We saw him have a really good season with Matt Nagy. Then when that offense was figured out, he wasn't able to adjust, but at times Mitch looked really good. I think a lot of that was on Nagy. I'd love to see him get another shot. I think New Orleans could be a really good place for Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, it feels like Trubisky's going to end up in Washington or maybe in New York fighting for Daniel Jones's job. I mean, he's kind of at the top of the wish list as far as reclamation projects are going right now. So having him go to Carolina if they don't draft a quarterback, I don't hate that. Denver.
Sam Darnold or Mitch Trubisky. Welcome to the Matt Rule era.
I mean, I think he could be successful in Denver. You know, by successful, I mean he's probably going to be middle of the pack, somewhere between 12 and 18 for fantasy. I don't know. I kind of buy into the Nagy effect on him. I mean, we saw it with Adam Gase and what he did to a lot of players, and it kind of seems like Nagy did that as well.
Yeah, I said it last offseason. I was kind of interested to see if Denver take a chance on Mitch Trubisky because I personally, I don't think Denver's going to get one of these big quarterbacks in a trade. I think they're probably going to end up taking one of the flyer on one of these guys in the second round, still have Locke under contract. We have the head coach now who's going to be calling the plays that was the offensive coordinator that willed Blake Bortles to the AFC Championship game. We have better weapons than that Jaguars team had, and I think Mitch Trubisky might be a guy that's better than we realize because we saw with him out of there, Chicago, actually their passing offense was worse last year, which is interesting enough. So I'm with you. I hope Mitch gets a chance to at least play somewhere, gets a shot, because he's always going to be kind of unfairly maligned because the team chose to trade up and take him over Desean Watson, which is not something he had a role in.
Well, I mean, he could have played worse in college. And
Come on.
He had that. I mean, he could have.
Oh, spicy take. Well, that's going to do it for today. We will be back on Friday looking at the franchise tag deadline and all the players that got franchise tag. Probably look at a few more free agency previews in terms of running backs, receivers, tight ends, because we'll know who is actually going to be available. But for now, have a great night.